the Last Minute Blues podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donnie Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on your home of the St. Louis Blues, 101 ESPN.
It is the Last Minute Blues podcast. We are live in the Jeff Burton studios. Donnie Fandango, Jeremy Rutherford, our buddy Alex, not with us for this one. That's all right, though, because we have somebody joining in his place. Ladies and gentlemen, Blues forward, Oskar Sundqvist joining us here. Sonny, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, the first thing that I want to ask, and I've been meaning to ask this all the way back to when we had Steve out here. What is the rule on fans like me calling you by your nickname? I am not your teammate. I don't play on a line with you or the power play.
Great.
What's the rule on that? Because if I can't call you Sonny, that's totally fine. I just want to know.
No, you definitely call me Sonny. There's no rules that says you can't. I also think for a lot of Americans, Sonny is way easier than trying to pronounce Sundqvist. So no, it's been a nickname now for a long time. So I'm totally fine with it. And you know, I when I meet someone on the street and they say Sonny, I kind of turn right away. So it's definitely okay to go by Sonny.
When you pull into Enterprise Center, get out of your car and head towards the locker room, is there anybody in the next 12 hours that calls you Oskar?
No, I don't think someone's called me Oskar in a long time in the locker room. They can, since some of the guys are very close friends and they know my wife, and she calls me Oski sometimes. So if they want to piss me off or mess with me, they call me Oski at the rink. So.
How has the summer been? I mean, I think you just got back into town. Do you spend time back in Sweden doing a balance between here and St. Louis and Sweden? Or?
It's been a great summer. Little more time away from St. Louis than usual or previous years. I usually do like 3 to 4 weeks in Sweden. Mm-hmm. And then we go down to my wife's parents down in Florida for a couple of weeks, and then the rest here usually. So we bounce around a little bit. We try to do either Sweden first, come back here and be here for a couple of weeks, and then we go to Florida. So, but the majority of the time is usually here in St. Louis.
You have a young daughter, Georgia. I think she's just 6 months today.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 6 months today.
What did it mean to you to take her back to Sweden?
Oh, it was awesome. Little nervous about the flight, but she did great. She slept the whole way, and for my parents to see her for the first time and all that stuff, it was amazing. The weather wasn't great, but other than that, everything was perfect.
Are you getting any sleep yet? I don't remember at 6 months where you're at on the sleep cycle, because I feel like for the first 2 years of all three of my kids' lives, I don't remember sleeping at all.
No, she's been amazing actually. She basically sleeps through the whole night. She just wakes up and being a little bit hungry here and there, but I've had a couple times when I've woken up and I've been like the next morning and I've been like, she slept through the whole night tonight. And my wife Blake goes, oh no, she did not. so I've been sleeping. I guess my wife had not as much.
Yeah. Well, wait till the season gets going. I remember when my kids were young, I covered all 82 games. I was on the plane with the team. So, every night we're in a different city. I'd come home after 10 days. I didn't play like you, obviously, but my wife would say, here.
Oh yeah, here you go. Time to be a dad.
Yeah. One thing that I've always really wondered about you, Sonny, and we've talked about it openly here in the podcast, is the way in which you play. Is you give every ounce of you to whatever team you're playing for, and we're thankful that is us and has been us. How in the world, in the off season and during the season, do you prepare and preserve your body for the entire run of an NHL season and playoffs? Because, man, you're a missile out there every night. So how in the world do you do that and keep yourself together?
Everyone has different setups during the summer and how they prepare. Obviously, for me, with my knees and my hips and everything the body's been through, you kind of try to first heal it up after the season and then kind of keep it good. I like to start working out like almost as soon as the season's over. Not crazy workouts, but like keep the body moving. And for me now, especially later years, I usually wait until like August until I start skating. I'm not a guy that, now at 32 that has to skate the whole summer, June, July, and all that stuff. So for me, it's more just listening to my body and what it needs. But yeah, like now we start ramping it up here in August and September and preparing more for what's coming here with training camp.
I can't remember, but I heard somebody talking about the Blues, and your name got brought up, and they were saying, and when I heard them say this, I was like, Sonny has to take that as a compliment. So now that we have you here, I want to ask you if you take this as a compliment. When people say, that guy, he's got to show up in Band-Aids and bandages and screws and stuff like that, just the way. So it's kind of similar to what Donnie's asking here, but you take that as a compliment that people know you're going to show up, even if with all the battles you've been through? Oh, yeah, no, definitely, and the style I've been playing for all these years, it obviously tears on your body, and the older I get, the more I would say I get wiser. And I kind of know what to do to keep my body at 100%, even if it hurts. But yeah, it's definitely a compliment. I always been a guy that want to put the team first, and you kind of do whatever it takes to help the team win.
That's fantastic. I want to ask you, I think this kind of sort of plays into that a little bit. Oskar, you signed a 1-year, 2-way deal this offseason to stay here in St. Louis. And it's a bit different than in years prior where you had, the 1 year guaranteed here. Why did you make that determination? Why were you okay with signing that 2-way deal, knowing that you might go to Springfield if for some reason you don't make the squad up here? I would assume some of that has to do with the one and only Steve Ott, who is the head coach in Springfield, but I don't know. Talk to us about that decision.
Second half of the season wasn't really what I hoped for. We kind of went downhill there and felt like nothing went my way, and after the season and talking with Steener and my agents obviously and all that stuff, and in the end what he came down to, like you said, Steve Ott's obviously a really good friend of me and really good coach, and I know what he expects and wants from his players, but I had a bunch of meetings with Steener and Army, and Army really helped me and talked me through everything and kind of giving me an insight on what can happen and what they expect. I had similar, a little bit better offers around the league, but in the end, you want to be where you feel comfortable. And I've said it a million times that I love St. Louis. It's my second home. So it wasn't a hard decision when the offer came up. So I'm excited. We'll see where it takes me. But I've been in this situation before, even if it's been a couple of years now. But I know what to do and what they expect from me. So, just excited to get started.
And Sonny, when you look at this roster, and you've been here a long time, you've proved yourself over the years, there's 17, 18 forwards. There's guys who, you look at the bottom 6 and you put 6 guys in there, the 7th, 8th, 9th guys played in the NHL the past couple of years, potentially. How do you, after all these years with what you've been through, say, I know I can be one of those bottom 6. I know I can still help this team?
I think for my experience, first of all, like I said, I've been through this situation with the uncertainty, if you want to say it like that, and I know how to prepare myself, and I know what they want from the bottom 6 guys. It is going to be a very tight race depending on who's taking the spot and who's not taking the spots. But I only see that as a positive thing for the whole organization to really have that compete, especially for the bottom 6 guys to really show up and show the management that you want that spot.
Does there get to be any sort of like awkwardness in the locker room when, you know, the race is tight for these spots? Like, does it ever get weird with any of the other guys that are kind of in that same sort of competition?
No, I don't feel like that usually happens. You know, we're all
pros.
We're all pros, and we're all here for a reason to win. You know, and what's best for the team. And you know, it's usually only healthy with that kind of competition. Mm-hmm. You kind of push yourself and the other guys to be at their best every day. So I've never been a part of it being awkward. It's only been a healthy competition.
Very good.
I know you want to stretch your career as long as you can, but I think when you re-signed here and, you know, two-way deal and, you know, hopefully that's spent in St. Louis, you know, if any in Springfield, obviously you can help that team too. But with that said, a lot of Blues fans responded to the news that you were coming back with, I hope he coaches in the organization one day. And I'm sure you've heard that from fans. Just what's your thought on that? Would you ever follow in Steve Ott's footsteps and go down that road?
I'm not sure if I could do coaching. It seems a little stressful, but you should never say never. But you know, definitely would love to work within the organization somehow. But like I said, I feel like a lot of guys that are coaching are getting gray hairs really quickly.
Sonny, what do you think about? All right, first I have to explain this a little bit. I am very excitable when it comes to my teams.
Understatement.
All right, understatement. Last year, I was incredibly fired up about the Blues. Obviously disappointed in the end result, but again, I tried to spend this offseason saying, listen, I'm not going to get above my head. I'm gonna pump the brakes. I'm gonna watch this fall through or come through. And we're a month or so away from training camp, and I friggin' can't wait for you guys to get started. And I think you're going to be fantastic. I want to know about what you think of the additions of McTavish, of McMichael, of Carlo. I really feel like you guys can make some noise this year again, for real. But again, I'm He's
actually doing a good job, Michelle.
What do you think, Sonny, of the additions that were made in the offseason?
I think they're great. You know, they're young guys, skilled guys that can really help this team move in the right direction. And then it's up to us guys that's been here to really make them feel comfortable and settle in as quick as possible. So we're not left behind when the season starts, if you want to say that. So, you know, we've all seen them play in the league, how good they are and how good they can be. Like I said, it's just up to us, older guys and more guys that's been here to help them out and really get them going in a good start.
I haven't been out to Steen yet. Sometimes when you go out there a little too early as a reporter, the guys are like, "Come on, bro, you know, like, give it. How about September?" You know, so I try not to get out there too early. But I think you've been skating out there. Any of the new guys out there yet? Can you tell us about that? And for the guys who have been in St. Louis the past couple of years, anybody stick out in terms of they look different, sound different, play different?
Today was McTavish's first day. He looked really good out there. You know, obviously. Pareko is just a monster out there, per usual. He looks healthy and he looks fit. So, Bucci came and we have walks. You know, we've been pushing each other out there and working hard, trying to ramp it up now for every week that goes. So no, I think, like I said, I think Pareko looks great. He looks healthy, and that can be. Massive addition, but you know he's been here obviously, but you know he I think he can have a bounce back season.
I know you've played against McTavish and you're familiar with his game, but now he skates on the ice today. You know, first time you've been teammates. Just what stuck out? I know he's got some size. Obviously, you guys aren't competing for a Stanley Cup in a practice like today. But what stood out to you?
I think just his ability, like with the puck in his shot, he's very strong on the puck, and he can really shoot it, but he can also make a goalie look pretty dumb. You know, he had a couple today when he did some moves and just put it in the back on the empty net. So he's a very, very excited to see what he can do with the Blues. I think he's a player that would fit into the style very well. Because from playing against him, he's hard to play against too. And he can be a guy that's in your face and you almost just want to punch him in the face. So I think he can fit in very well.
Do you guys at all, and I assume that you probably don't because you're grown-ups, but do you at all pay attention to the rankings on NHL 27?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't. But I'm too old for it.
I get it. I completely.
Maybe if I was Snugger would say I would do it.
Well, the reason that I ask is because I feel like there's a bit of a pattern emerging in the NHL when they're covering the Blues. And that I feel like Joel Hofer is not getting the credit that Joel Hofer deserves for having, outside of the first couple weeks of the season, an absolutely freaking incredible year last year. So they only gave him like an 85 or something. And then you'll see a list of like top goalies in the NHL, and you don't see Hofer on that. And I think that is absolutely positively crazy. I feel like Hofer's a guy that could maybe eventually win a Vezina. What do you think about Joel Hofer back there?
I think he's great, and we've talked about it the whole last season too. Even when we weren't playing good, we do have, and we strongly believe that we have the best goaltenders in the league. I don't think it's a question on one and two how good those two guys are. And like I said, Hofer had a real breakout season last season, and he was amazing. We probably should have lost a bunch of those games that he stole, but I think for him now it's more to prove that he can do it again. Yeah. And like you said, like watching him during games and practice, he's amazing. He's really good.
And the guy who has helped put this roster together is a former teammate of yours. You touched on him earlier, Alexander Steen. You got a contract from him, so I'm sure you're glad at that point. Just what's it like? I asked a lot of former Blues, current players, just seeing Alexander Steen in that position. Why do you think he's going to be a good GM?
I think his hockey knowledge, first and foremost. He really knows the game well, and it was a quick transition. I feel like this is not normal, but like I said, like with how he is as a person and his knowledge about everything around the league and how he wants to play hockey is he's kind of great. He's easy to talk to, even though it's a little bit harder now, obviously, than when we were teammates. To have a nice conversation, but no, he's great, and he's going to be doing a really good job in the future. It's first year, so I guess we'll see. I think, like we talked about before, with the McTavish, Carlo, and McMichael additions, he's off to a good start, and I think it's going to be an exciting season, especially if we can get those guys acclimated real quick.
Yep. And also, too, I would think in that locker room, getting off to a good start in the 2026-2027 season is a really big deal, because it seems like the last couple of years, it's been a bit of a slow start, and you kind of been having to play catch up for those last couple months.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we've talked about it too internally about the slow starts, and you especially in the Central Division, you can't have a slow start. Then you have Colorado, Dallas, and those guys gonna run away with it. So you need to be ready from the first game, and I think what I've heard with Steener and Monty is that the kind of setup is changing for training camp on how they want things to go, and really make sure that we're ready when the first game comes.
Yeah, speaking of that, you mentioned Colorado, Dallas. Did you look at the schedule when it came out and said, damn, October 2nd, October 3rd, back-to-back on the road?
Oh, yeah. No, it's a good challenge. I feel like we often start away against Dallas, and it's a good test. You can't say anything about that. So I think guys are going to be excited. But obviously, it's like I said, it's a hard first two games, but it will show where we at and really determine like if we're ready or not.
All right, I got one more for you, and then we got to let you run, Sonny. And it's great to have you here. I want to know, on this Blues team, who are the best chirpers on this team? Are you one of the best? Who are, like, they will say something to an opposing player, and you'll get back to the bench and go, that was a fantastic line. Like, anybody on the team like that?
I got to go through them real quick in my head, but sticks out right away is Walker, obviously.
Yeah,
he's quick, and he's, he's always got a comeback. So
yeah.
And I think he's older now, so I think the short thing doesn't work on him.
right.
He's heard that too many times. So I definitely think Walker. Jake's pretty good too, but not as vocal, I would say, as Walks. You could sit all the way on the other side of the bench and you can hear Walks. So I would give it to Walker.
Yeah, and Sonny, I know that you guys have your player bus, when you fly into Nashville or wherever, and we had the media bus, so it's me and Kerber and Chaser. I was so slow on the comebacks that Chaser would chirp me. I'd come back about 37 seconds later, and he'd say,
It was kind of over.
welcome to the conversation, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, you have to be quick sometimes. Otherwise, it's like you just come to dumb, And I mean, Chaser is one of those guys. He's so quick.
So quick.
It doesn't take but a half a second, and you're already lost.
Yeah.
You're buried.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, those guys, Chaser, Walks, it's like, they don't even think. It just comes out right away, and
and they don't care what they say.
Oh, no, they do not.
Well, Oskar, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio on the podcast. We are so amped up about this season, and I speak as a St. Louis hockey fan. Brother, we love the way that you play. We are so happy and honored that you wear the blue note, and you're just one of our favorites. And we hope that when your career is over, hopefully that won't be anytime soon, that you'll be back in St. Louis being a part of the alumni here, because you are, again, just one of our favorites.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Oscar.
A lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Or
Oskar Sundqvist.
Sorry.
For Jamie Rutherford, our buddy Alex Ferrario, I'm Donnie Fandango. Thank you, as always, to Oskar Sundqvist for stopping by. More of the Last Minute Blues podcast next week. Thanks as always for listening and watching, and let's go Blues.
Thanks for tuning into the Last Minute Blues podcast on your home for Blues hockey, 101 ESPN.